Okay, hi everyone. We are here to play with some polymer clay today. And normally when we teach polymer clay classes we are making jewelry, earrings and necklaces and bracelets and all sorts of fun stuff. But today's a little bit of a departure because we are working on some very, very simple polymer clay projects for entertaining, for your house, for decorating. So what we are making today are, and we can switch to the top-down camera. You can get a little sneak peek of this. What we are making today are some napkin rings in a few different styles. We'll show you how to make those. Some wine charms, either with patterns or initials, and some really cute little rustic trees. So let's dive right in. This is a beginner polymer clay class. So these are for people that you've heard of polymer clay, you've wanted to dive into it, and so this is the class for you. So let me clear my space here because we're going to start with wine charms. So like I said, normally we teach all sorts of classes on jewelry making, but so many of the techniques that you use in jewelry making can apply to making other things. And one of those that's very easy to switch from jewelry to home is wine charms. So these are little charms that you put on the stem of your wine glass when you're hosting a party, or on the neck of your water bottle, so that people can distinguish which glass or which bottle is theirs. So these work up very easily. Usually people make these in sets of 6 or sets of 12. It's a great thing to give away as a gift, is a set of wine charms. And these are made using this little finding here, which is actually a hoop earring finding, but we've repurposed it to turn it into a wine charm. So let's go over some basics as we get started. So we have a small group with us today. I'd love to hear from all of you in the chat. Please use the chat function if you have any questions about what I'm doing, and we will make sure to get you an answer. All right, so let's first talk about supplies. All right, so what I'm bringing in here is actually a ceramic tile that I got in my local home improvement store. And I like to work on a ceramic tile. It just streamlines everything, and it's a very smooth, glossy finish to work on. So the next thing you're going to need is obviously some clay. I have clay here, and this clay, I've already been conditioning it, which is where you're warming up the clay and you're getting it ready to use. So the conditioning works in your benefit in a lot of different ways. And since we're crafting with a solid color clay today, conditioning is really important. So these are 2 balls of clay that I've been conditioning. I also have some clay tools. I have a roller. I have a sharp metal cutter, this little cutter. I have some plastic cutters in different shapes and sizes. These are gonna, like cookie cutters, gonna cut out the clay for me. I have a few findings. I showed you the finding here. This is the hoop earring finding for making wine charms. I also have an assortment of texture sheets. So this, I can use these to emboss a pattern in the clay. So I'll show you how I use that. And then I also have some other tools here. These are thickness guides, so that when I roll out my clay, I can roll it out to an even thickness. I have a little jar of cornstarch over here. This is just so that things don't stick to each other. What else do I have? I have everything here in front of me. I do have some gold paint. We're going to use this. This is from Folk Art, and it is just like a beautiful pearlescent gold. So we're going to use this in like the final stages to make these really special. All right, let's get started here. So first I'm going to take one of my clay colors here. And as I said, I've conditioned this. This is nice and warm. You can see how malleable it is. And I just set that down, and I'm going to grab my thickness guides. Now these white thickness guides is very hard to see, but it does say 3 mm there. And so I lay those on either side of my clay and I get a roller. So we are doing this the old-fashioned way with a little bit of elbow grease to roll this clay out to one even thickness. All right, so it rolls really easily, especially it's because it's been conditioned well. So I can really just roll this. Now, if you don't want to do it the old-fashioned way, you can use a pasta machine. Always, if you're using a pasta machine, don't use the same pasta machine that you're going to cook your food on. You want to use a separate pasta machine that you have just for crafting. All right, so that is rolled out there. So now I can go in with cutters, any size, shape cutters that I want. And we have a lot of different sizes. They're sold like this in the jewelry making department. So you can see you get a lot of different shapes together. So anything from like a hexagon to a moon. We have a little like leaf shape. So I can use those and just to make sure that they don't stick, just dip them in a little bit of cornstarch. And then you can go ahead and start cutting. Okay, so that's pretty simple. Now, if I wanted to put a texture on this before I cut it, so let me show you some of our charms here. You'll notice that they have some beautiful embossed texture. Let me show you how to do that. So that is are those texture sheets that I showed you. These texture sheets, now this is some cornstarch that I have on there. This is what they look like. They're double-sided. This one has a smaller daisy and a bigger daisy. And I want to use cornstarch with those. I always keep a little bowl here and an old paintbrush. And I just brush that on the top of the clay. This is so we can make sure that it won't stick, because we're going to press very hard into all of these nooks and crannies. And so we want to make sure we don't have any sticking. Let me get rid of these. And let's put this down. And you can use your roller here. Now, the name of the game when you're rolling on one of these texture sheets is you do not want it to move. If you move that texture sheet after you start rolling, it's going to mess up the pattern underneath it. So with one hand, I'm really holding it down, and the other hand, I'm kind of slowly working my way up to the top. And then when we need to switch hands, same thing. I'm holding it with one hand and rolling it down with the other. And you can put quite a bit of pressure on this. Roll this all the way down. And you want to be careful of your edges. The edges tend to not get as deeply embossed. So I'm kind of just going over this and making sure that I've made good contact with all of the edges. All right, let's see what we got. Look at that, so pretty. I love these. I love this particular little daisy. So we have our texture, and then you can go in with your cutter. Let's do something bigger. And because you can see through, bring you in a little bit here, you can decide exactly what you want that to look like. So here I can like line up that center daisy. Let's see. And that's what I'm going to get. So you would fill up the rest of the space with whatever shapes you're going to do. Let's do some different shapes. The squiggle shape is fun. Don't forget the cornstarch. All right, so you would fill up the space with any shapes of your choice, and then we weed out the extra like that. That one came off very easily. And so the cool part about working on a ceramic tile is that I don't have to mess around with this much. I can just leave them where they are. I don't have to transfer it to another worksheet, for example. Sorry, not a worksheet. Another baking sheet. I can just leave it where it is. And if I see that I have any, kind of rough edges, I can go in with a sharp tool like this or a toothpick and go around and just make sure that those edges are clean. Mine look clean. I'm happy with this. I'm not going to touch them at all. These can go directly into the oven just like this. So that is kind of your first, well, I guess your second level. The first level would be just a plain smooth surface. Second level is adding texture. And now I'm going to show you a third level. And for that, I have some clay here. You want to keep it conditioned during the process. So I'm kind of just working this a little bit. Bring it back out. Ooh, there we go. So you want to keep it conditioned. And this is a really fun technique to be able to have monograms. So you want to work with really well-conditioned clay for this technique. And I am bringing in a supply that I didn't mention, which is the silicone mold. We use these clear silicone molds in UV resin classes that I also teach on michaels.com. Those are really fun. I don't know if you have tried UV resin before, but it is a blast. And so you can make almost anything with it. And a lot of the supplies cross over into other crafts. So these silicone molds can be used with polymer clay very easily. And because you can see that the mold is already flipped, it's inverted. So like the B is facing the wrong way. So that works to our advantage here. All right, so I want to take a little bit of my clay in kind of a blob, and I want to press it into that letter B just with my fingers. I'm pressing it in and kind of making the area that's near that B flat. And then when look what I get. I get a perfectly embossed B. And then kind of lay that down. Then I can just take a cutter, cornstarch, and cut around the B. And that's how you get a monogram. I love this look. And actually, after we bake this, I want to add some of this to those letters to really make them pop. So I'll show you how to do that. But it's as simple as that. And let me bring you in on that B that we just did. So I want to show you. See how the foot of it over here? It's a little kind of messy. Before I bake it, I can just go and pick up that little extra, and then it's a smooth, clean edge. All right, so my level 1, my level 2, my level 3, these are ready to go in the oven. So this is a great time to talk about how to cook polymer clay. So if you didn't know, polymer clay is an oven-baked clay. And so you do need to bake it in an oven or a toaster oven. And you want to set that for 250 degrees, bake it for 20 minutes. And actually, I've been experimenting with a technique where I bake it for 20 minutes and then I turn the oven off and just kind of let it cool in there naturally. And I really like that technique because you're not handling it straight out of the oven. You're allowing it to kind of cool. And I think that it makes the clay really strong. So this is baked. I baked these last night. And when clay is baked properly, it is very flexible. Your clay should not be brittle. If your clay is brittle, it means you haven't cooked it long enough. So always when you are baking your clay, you want to err more on the side of baking it longer than baking it shorter. Because at 250 degrees, it takes a lot for it to burn. All right, so as I said, these are ready. These are already baked. Let me move those. These are ready to go into the oven. And before they go into the oven, I can start thinking about my attachment points. So let's see here. There's a lot of different ways to attach this later. But before we go into the oven, this is just an option. I'm going to show you a lot of different ways to get this metal loop up at the top. So the first option is to use this is an eye pin. This is another finding. It's found in the jewelry making department. And I'm just going to cut off a little bit of that eye pin. And I am going to stick it in where I want this to go in the top. And I can just bake it like that. So the metal finding is already inserted. Let me take that out. So that's option one. Now I will have to glue that after it bakes, but that's option one. Option two is another finding, and I think this one holds a little more securely. These are called eye screws or screw eyes. Very similar to a head pin, except it has threads where you screw that in. So for me to do that, I do want to pick up this charm, and to pick up clay that's raw, you want to be very careful with it, and you want to scoot your metal under there. And so to use this is I just screw this in as if there was a hole there, screwing it in. And then I want to make sure like the clay is around that. And I can bake it with that eye already in there. So that's the second method of getting that loop up at the top. And now let me show you a third method. So in the third method, we have forgotten to do anything before we bake it. We've already baked it. It's come out of the oven. And here's what it looks like. So here, this clay is already baked. It's a lot more firm and very flexible. Okay, so you at this point would need to drill a hole in the top. And this is a great little hand drill. I think the official name for this is a pin vise, but I just call it a hand drill. And you can drill wherever you need to add an attachment point and just start twisting and go down maybe about an 1/8 of an inch or so, because we are going to use that same eye screw and glue that in there. Make sure you spend time making sure that that is centered, because I can see that my hole was not centered. And you are going to want to glue that. Here you can see a good view of the hole. You are going to want to glue that. Now, anytime you are gluing polymer clay to metal, I recommend this Loctite super glue. They have a few different versions of it, but this is the gel version. Let me get a little piece of paper. Easiest way to do this is take a little piece of paper and put a little dot of the glue, tiny little amount. And then if this is hard for your fingers to handle, you can bring in a tool to hold that. Let's dip it. And there you go. And that is going to be a permanent bond right there. So I showed you 3 different levels of making these wine charms. And here are 3 different methods of getting that loop into the top. So you can, if you think about it before you bake it, you can put something in there and bake it in there. If you don't think about it before you bake it, you have to drill a hole. And then you place a finding in there. Okay, are you with me? Are we good? And then I do want to show you how pretty this looks with a little bit of paint on there. So I'm again just going to bring in this Post-it note. And a little bit of paint. Come on. It's coming. It's slow. Tiny little bit is all we need. Okay. And a paintbrush. And I want to kind of do a dry brush technique, so I'm not putting that much paint on the brush and just dry brushing over the top. I just want to catch the raised areas. So having less paint on the brush gives you more control. Pretty. How about a little bit more? And if you go over, that's fine. A wet Q-tip, you can clean that up. But look how pretty that is. I love it. And on anything else that has an embossed pattern, this works just as well. Again, use a dry brush to make sure that you can really control that application. Okay, so project 1 is done. Wine charm. Oh, no, it's not done. We forgot to turn it into an actual wine charm. That might help. Let's do that part. This is the easy part, though. So inside this package, it actually has a few different sizes of these hoops. You can see it comes in a few different sizes. I think that the smallest size works best. And just slide that on. And this is how it goes on and off of the... Actually, what you can do is put a little bend right here in the wire. And that'll make it stay. And that's how you put it around your wine glass. Cute. All right, let me clean up here. I saw a question in the chat. Thank you for putting your question there. And the question was, how long do you condition your clay? And, you know, I don't have an answer for you that works with every single clay brand and every single clay color, because you will find that the texture of clay varies depending on the brand, and even within a brand depending on the color. So white, the closer to white clay that you get, the harder it is to start with, and it takes longer to condition. But a color like this may only take a few minutes. You will feel it as you are working it with your hands like this. You will feel when it becomes just pliable, supple in your hands, and it actually warms up from the warmth of your hands. All right, so let's move this stuff out of the way. Another question I saw in the chat was, how long do you bake it again? 250 degrees at 20 minutes. All right, I am going to move these to a separate baking sheet. And I never love to do this because unless you are super careful, you're probably going to distort the shapes that you've created. Even when you are careful, it's, you know, it may want to distort a little bit. So I try to move it as little as possible. Like this one. Ooh, there we go. Got it. All right. Let's clean that up. All right. All right, next project are these napkin rings. So I love the formality of using napkin rings at your holiday table. There's really no other time of year that I use it except at holiday time. But it's super fun, and you can customize what colors you want, what textures you want on there. And you know, they're going to be rustic. They're not going to be perfectly formed. This isn't something that comes out of a mold. This is something that you make with your hands. And so it's okay if it looks handmade. So here are some examples. I call this one ribbon style because you're going to make a ribbon and kind of move it, fold it over itself, or snake style where you're making a round snake and folding it over. All right, let's go. So here's my well-conditioned clay. Again, if you have a pasta machine, it makes it really easy to work with this clay and to get it to an even, consistent thickness. But if you don't have a pasta machine, I'll show you. Let's scoot this over a little bit. So I just have a roller. I can also use the cornstarch here, just like, you know, when you're rolling something out in the kitchen, you would add flour so it doesn't stick. Same thing here. So I can add that cornstarch to the roller, to the clay, to both, however you want to do it. And let's just roll this. And the clay guides are at either side. So this is going to help me roll it to exactly 3 millimeters, that is. All right. And I'm actually going to take off those thickness guides and do this a little by hand because I know that I need a long piece of it. So I just want to make sure I have that. Now, little things will get stuck in your clay. Any little bit of dirt, pet hair, any little bit of lint that you have on your working surface is going to get into your clay. So that has happened to me here. I don't know what this is, but it is a little, I don't know, piece of lint, something. So I want to get that out of there. Okay, now if you wanted to add a texture, some of these rings that we have here have a texture on them. I would do that first. Lay down your texture sheet, roll that on. But on this first one, I'm actually not going to add a texture. I want to cut out a ribbon. This is about, it's less than 1/2 of an inch. I would say 3/8 of an inch wide. And you're likely going to be making these more than one at a time. So just cut out using your blade very carefully a strip that is the width that you want. Now I just want to show you this. These blades, this comes in the sort of basic clay toolkit sold in the jewelry making department. I put a little bit of extra clay on the side here, and I put this whole thing in my oven and I baked it. And that's just so that I can have a finger hold here at the top of this very, very sharp blade. And you can put 2 finger holds if you want. It just helps me use it a little more confidently and not hurt myself. All right, so here's my ribbon. And now I want to take that and wrap that around something that is about the size napkin ring that I want. So the something that I'm using, I actually have this little flashlight over here. And it's just about the diameter of something that I would use for a napkin. Let me just put that like that so it doesn't get in the way. I'm sure you have something around your house that is cylindrical in the size that you want. So just lay that around. And I'm not like pushing it up against the flashlight because I do need to remove this, but I'm just gently laying that around and crossing the ends over. And then I can go in with my blade and cut the ends so that they look nice and neat. And let's remove this. And you can kind of make sure it's just right, and that is ready to go into the oven. So that's sort of the crossover style. So let's pretend, oh, let's leave that one as it is. That one turned out pretty. I don't want to mess with it. So let's cut some more clay. Now with this, I am going to make a snake. Like this, with your hands like that. Now, our jewelry designer, Rosa Vergara, who's on here with us, she's wonderful. And she's discovered that, let me use a different one here. These thickness guides, you can use them in a couple really creative ways. And one of them is to make perfect snakes. So you can see when you look at this, it's kind of bumpy and lumpy. If you use this instead of your fingers, you're going to get rid of those bumps and lumps. And look how nice and smooth that makes it. Gorgeous, gorgeous, gorgeous. All right, and I can keep working this. Even stretch it out a little bit. There we go. And we're going to do the same thing that we did. I'm going to bring my little flashlight in here. And you can use whatever you have that is the size napkin ring that you want. Wrap it around and do a little overlap here. You want to be careful. Right here, I got my fingernail imprint in there. So just be careful that you don't do that. And let's cut off the ends. Let's see, I think we'll do those straight up and down too. Straight up and down. There we go. All right, and that's ready to go into the oven. You can make yourself a full set of these in any color that you want. And we can bake these, and then after you bake them, you can also add paint like we did for our wine charm. And so let me show you some of the other examples that I have over here. Here's that crossover style. Here's a crossover style with some texture. Really pretty. Now this one, when we baked it, it came undone. You can just put a little dot of glue there so that it sticks together. This one's kind of an infinity style. This one's harder to do, especially when you're working with texture. You're never going to get that seam just perfect. But this is a nice little clean look. Here's another example of that. And here's that back seam. It's not going to be perfect. Here's the ones that I made. This one, kind of, I call this like more of a belt style where it crosses over, but with a pretty little diagonal edge, you can get it to look very clean. Very nice. All right. So we are moving at warp speed here to our next project, which are these gorgeous trees. So these trees, you could use them as just a little decoration. But I love the idea of giving this as a gift to be used as a ring tree to store your rings. Here's a ring. Like on your bedside table. What a cute little gift to give somebody. So we do have a template for these trees that we'll be putting in the chat. And that template is going to help you cut the right shape to make these trees. So let's scoot these out of the way. Okay, this is what the template looks like. That is very hard for you to see. This is what that template looks like. And on the template, we have 2 different sizes for you to choose from. I like the smaller size. So let me scoot these out of the way because I need to bring in another ceramic tile. And this one is round. Not that that matters at all, but change of scenery here. All right, so on on this ceramic tile, I have a piece of clay. I conditioned this clay in my hands, conditioned it, and I did end up using a pasta roller to get it this flat. So this is, if you have a pasta machine, this is at setting number 2 on the pasta machine. So it makes, you can see the edge there is very, very thin. And you do want these trees to be thin. Here's a closer look at some trees. You can kind of see how thin that edge is. All right, so taking your template. Actually, let's add a texture to this one first. I'm gonna add some cornstarch. You don't want it to stick. And let's pick a nice texture. How about this kind of scrollwork one? All right, so lay that down. And with your roller, we're going to hold it in place and roll with the other hand. Now, if you do not have texture sheets, there are probably things that you have in your household that you can use to add really pretty texture. One of them that I've seen a lot of people using is sandpaper. If you roll on top of sandpaper, you can get like a really cool texture on your clay. All right, making sure to get to all the edges and not letting this texture sheet budge. Once you kind of get it rolled in, it'll stick on its own and it won't scoot around on you. Look at that. So you can see the texture sheets, they're not foolproof. You can see like these textures came out a lot more crisp than this texture. And that's just from my rolling of it. I did not roll it evenly. So let's try that again. You know, if it doesn't work the first time, just try again. I'm going to flip this over. I'm going to add cornstarch to this side. And let's try again. Put that down. And with your roller, start rolling the edges. I can tell you the more intricate the pattern on these texture sheets, the more careful you need to be with rolling. Now I've really gotten that stuck down there. So here's where I can use both hands. And I'm actually applying a lot of pressure here. You can also stand up and really get your body weight on there, because I love it when the texture comes out really deep and juicy. All right, hopefully we did better this time. My clay wants to come up. Oh no, stay down. There we go. That's better. Pretty scroll texture. Okay, here's my template. So you do want to print out the template, and you're going to need an X-Acto knife or a sharp blade to cut. So I'm just gingerly placing this template because I don't want to destroy that texture that we put on there. All right, and just removing the clay as I go, trying to keep my template centered. Oh, it didn't cut through all the way. And this we can just bundle back up again and use it for the next project. All right, this is what we have. Now this is the moment of truth where you curl this on itself. So it helps if you kind of put your finger inside, start to roll this. And we're making a cone. So there should be a little overlap here on the edges. And I'm being very ginger with this because I don't want to mess up that scroll work texture. So you can kind of press on the inside, and to make those the two flaps stick together, I go in with a sharp tool and I kind of score alongside. I know that you can't see what I'm doing because it's inside this tree, but let me do it and then I'll show you what I did. See how I made kind of like score lines? I'm trying to marry the two pieces together from the inside. All right, and then so you can gently try to work the seam together. It's not going to be perfect. This is not some plastic item that came out of a mold in China. This was made by your clever little hands. And so you want to, it's going to have some rustic charm. Don't worry if it's not perfect. So set it up like that. And right now I'm looking to see if it's leaning to one side, leaning to the other side. It looks pretty good. If you have a leaning tree, the easiest way to fix that I found is just going in with some scissors, and you can kind of cut off little bits of clay that are making it wonky along that bottom edge. Okay, now when you want to bake this, I'm going to take my same paper template. This is just printed out in my home printer. And I'm going to use this inside there to kind of give it stability in the oven. So I'm just rolling this up and putting it inside. Actually, let me roll that a little bit better so that it won't be so crooked. Like that. So I baked these ones that I made, I baked in my oven with the paper in there, and it did not singe or brown or blacken that paper in any way. It came out exactly right. So you can use that as a little form to hold this together. And so that is ready to go into the oven. 250 degrees, 20 minutes. And one note of caution about that 20 minutes. If you have something that you've made that's really thick, let's say instead of making jewelry, you're making a charm, a little bird charm, let's say. If what you're making is very thick, cook it for longer. Cook it for 25 minutes, even a half an hour. Better to err on the side of cooking it longer than cooking it not enough. And I'll show you an example of this. This is an earring that we made in a class, recent class, I think it was last week, this cute little knit cap. And so when I turn it to the side, you can see with this faux braiding that we did on the top, how thick that is. That is easily, 5 or 6 millimeters thick. This is going to need a little bit of extra, 5-8 minutes extra in the oven if it's thick like this. So just FYI. All right, so that's ready to go in the oven. Let's pretend that this just came out of the oven. This is one that I made last night. And before I put them in the oven, I ransacked my charm stash looking for a star charm. I thought, how cute would it be if there was a little star at the top of that? And I didn't find this, but I found this piece. And I kind of stuck it into the wet clay before I put it in the oven. And look at it now. How cute is that? I love it. And on this little one, I found another charm. So you can add metal charms. This one is going to need a dot of glue to stick. But look how cute that will be. And on this other one that I made, I stuck this charm in there. And I actually baked this particular cone with this charm, this metal charm inside it. And at a 250-degree oven, that's not going to hurt your metal charms. It's not going to melt that metal down. It will be just fine in the oven. Especially, and you want to make sure it has a glass rhinestone, not a plastic rhinestone, just because you want to avoid plastics. Okay, so you can dress these up, and even dressed up, they will still function. If you want to make something functional, still function as a ring cone. All right, now let's make this pretty. So let me show you an example. Here's that same gold paint that I used. Let's bring that back. You can go in with a toothpick, or if you're fancy and you have a dotting tool, that would be a perfect time to use it. So this is already cooked out of the oven. And put a little dot in each of these spaces. And of course, if you are an accomplished painter, you can work wonders with these trees. You can add faux lights, garland, really fun things, but just this little bit of metallic pop really makes a difference. All right, so before I let you go, we're wrapping it up here. If you have any questions, now is the time to ask them in the chat. I just wanted to do a quick recap of some of the pieces that we made in our last Christmas class. And I want to showcase this particular pair of earrings that I just adore. These little candy canes. And it's not made with red, it's made with this sort of terracotta color, which I think just looks so pretty. Here's another version with a slightly darker tone in there. We also made these in green. I just love these. If you're interested in knowing how we made these, we can put a link to our most recent class, which is up on Michael's YouTube, on how to do it. But very, very similar techniques to what we just did in this class. Super cute. Also in that class, we made this little snowman. You can turn him into earrings, or he can be a necklace pendant, like a long pendant. Super simple. We also made some chunky braided hoop earrings. And this is just braided polymer clay. Question about the trees. Do we bake them with the charms or without? I did both. I did both ways. So this is my raw clay that we just made together. If I wanted to bake it with this charm, I can stick that charm in there and put that in the oven, just like that. Or if you don't feel like you want to put a metal charm in the oven, again, no harm in doing that. You can kind of stick it in there to make an impression of where it's going to fit, and then take it out and bake this, and then marry them after it's baked with a little bit of glue. How cute. Great question. Thank you. All right, guys, we are wrapping it up here. Thank you so much for joining us, and I hope that you learned a little something today. I hope that you will try out polymer clay jewelry making and just polymer clay in general for holiday crafting. So join us in January. Again, we do a few classes a month. We do polymer clay, We do UV resin jewelry crafting. So come back, join us, always on michaels.com. You can check in the classes and events tab for future classes. Thank you guys so much. Happy holidays to all of you. We'll see you next time.